everyone, and welcome back to the CQQC podcast. My name is Gabe, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Bryan and Nate, as always. And today we have a very special guest, as I like to call the man, the myth, the legend. And now, as I take it, it's Professor Ross.
Hello.
Professor Kyle Ross. How's it going?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, do you want to quickly, briefly talk about what we just talked about, the Professor Ross story, so people have some sort of context?
Sure. I am now teaching a single course at Queen's University, which technically makes me a professor, but not really.
Are you the first? Actually, no. I think you're the second professor Quidditch player in Canada, because I think Matt Barassa was a professor at Western for a while. So you might not even be breaking ground, Kyle. I'm sorry to say. I just realized this now. Take a little steam out of your sails.
I wasn't trying to break down. Just taking my knowledge of the rules and my ability to teach people rules and just applying it to a university setting, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So for those that don't know you, Kyle, do you want to just quickly give a brief intro to career in Quidditch, kind of your role with Quidditch, etc.?
Yeah, well, what I'm probably known best for is being the guy who's not allowed to sit down during any tournament ever, and probably reffing all of the most important games from the Eastern Regionals and Nationals when they're in the East. I was a longtime captain on Queens for a number of years on and off, and then I was a gameplay coordinator by not choice, but force. For a number of years. Eventually then Atana and I, when Atana was the head of gameplay, we switched roles, and then I was voluntold to become the head of the gameplay department, and that's the position that I currently have. So basically what I do is I make the rule changes for Canada, I make or change the ref test for Canada, I make all the gameplay policies for Canada, and I make the schedules and ref schedules for all of the major tournaments. While also playing on a team and being a keeper and seeker.
And then since you've forced me onto gameplay, being set slightly of my own volition of just being like, yeah, I guess sure, I'll try some stuff, and then you're like, no, yeah, you're quote unquote.
Why don't you try those in an official sitting if you love them so much? Just come on, do some stats. I have some ideas. Maybe you can put them in practice.
I'm stats boy. That's all I do. And I'm Kyle's sounding board, more or less. But
yep.
This is also the first recorded chat of our actual CQQC podcast Facebook group, because our chat that me, Nate, and Gabe actually figure everything out on, Kyle's actually on there as well, which I don't remember what we originally added you for the purpose of, but you've always been a good sounding board of just yeah, okay.
Originally I was going to be a co-host. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, and then it was you might have too much conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest.
Do you, Bryan, do you I think it was you that said that you'd listen to the Steve Dangle podcast?
Yep.
I do.
Yeah.
So Kyle is kind of the equivalent of Chris Johnson. So Chris Johnson's one of the unofficial co-hosts. So
yes.
I lurk in the Facebook chat. I chime in from time to time, and now I'm actually in on an episode, which is nice.
Season 2.
Took you long enough.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, season 2.
We've been more consistent recently.
We're the best for last.
Yeah.
I thought I'd get on when I revealed the new changes for the rulebook. I figured I'd get on for that podcast, but no, you talked about without me.
Yeah. We saved you for a special episode for your own, posthumously after those rule changes came out. So you've had time to ferment and think about all that stuff. But yeah.
That is how I spend most of my time, is fermenting and thinking about Quidditch rules and stuff.
I'm not wrong. I'm really not.
No. That wasn't a joke. That's serious. I lie awake at night in bed thinking about changes to Quidditch rules.
Yep.
All right, cool. Awesome. So if you couldn't already tell, this episode is going to be about some of the rule changes we've seen, and kind of asking questions for both Kyle as well as Bryan from average Joes like myself and Nate, who, although we have experience playing the game, we still, honestly, I probably don't know all the rules, and I kind of go, I see my pants, trial by fire, as we say on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to get into it, Brian, and kind of go through the list we have here?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing to start off, and I think it's kind of a major point to start off, given the fact that Kyle, you being a keeper/seeker, we are still all just Quaffle players. We're no experts in this field, but when it comes to beating, I'd say at least the most contentious point has been the reasonable beat attempt. So do you want to go over the history of what kind of changed there, Kyle, and what's kind of, where is it at now?
Sure. So the reason the reasonable beat attempt is revolving around the third bludger. So typically the way that the game had shaped before, with the third bludger, the most beneficial thing for someone to do is to let the opposing beater without a bludger come and try to get back the third bludger, which is the bludger that's on the ground, and at the last second, toss the ball back and pick up the other one. Over the years, I'm not sure who figured it out first or finally read the rulebook and saw this bit of ambiguity, but they realized that the most efficient thing was not to throw the ball back, but instead to make a beat attempt that was close, but intentionally missed the target.
Yeah.
And by doing so, then the ball doesn't have to go directly back to the other team's beater. It could go off the sides. It could go off the pitch. So long as it wasn't clear that you were intending for the ball to go off the pitch. And so then the center of focus became this reasonable beat attempt, even though it had been in the rules already. It's just someone figured out that it is the more efficient thing to do than giving the team the ball back.
Well, I remember, I think in my third year at a golf tournament in fall, when Gola was playing for them, shout out to friend of the show, Gola, we were in the finals with Valhalla, and the first, minute or two of the game, it was a low-scoring game in the end, but, there was a sequence where basically Gola went to beat someone, and it went high. I still think it was high, but it was a beat attempt, and it was deemed reasonable.
Gola's a tall guy. Most of his beats are from high.
Yeah, which is fair, right? The only problem is it was a windy day, and the ball got carried so far off pitch to God knows where that by the time one of our beaters was able to get one bludger back, we were already have to be walking upfield and pressured, and we're well, we have nothing. There is nothing to protect us. We're done. And it was a completely legal play, and it was you could completely exploit this as we watched the phone backlane, and we're yeah, you could do this all day, and it's legal. And that's kind of that started the thing of I know you.
And the reason it was legal is because it makes perfect sense for it to be illegal. You don't want to punish the person who has a bludger by saying you can't make a beat. You should be able to make a beat, try to make a beat, and if the beat misses, then sure, you can pick up the bludger. But with the change to what's being taught now, and what I know is a play or a thing that they try at Team Canada from the number of times I've gone and helped out with those practices, is that no, you intentionally miss, so now you're actually not doing what the rule was intended to do. You're not following the spirit of the rule, which is to give the other team back a bludger so that they can actually get back into the game and participate.
And if I remember, one of the amendments that was made a year after that, or it was kind of an in-between rule that we had, was you could throw a bludger back. And obviously you have to throw it, I think it's less than a 45-degree angle, so you can't throw it higher than it traveled. But
45-degree angle is a bit hard to put, but I think it has to be more. It has to go more in the X direction, so along the ground, than the Y direction. Was I think finally the wording we finalized on.
Yeah, you can't just sky the ball up.
We also then made it so that it couldn't go past the
keeper line.
Not the keeper line, but the hoop line.
Oh, hoop lines, yeah.
Yeah, because we didn't want. Also, then what people started to try to do is, I'm going to throw it back and I'm going to whip it so hard it sails right by their hoops, and it comes to a rest just before what was then the soft boundary.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it was also it could keep rolling, and then whatever AR or worst case a goal ref would take the ball if it went too far, and it would be just placed on like the edge of the grass, which
isn't a goal ref's job.
Which isn't their job.
Would be the AR, but the AR, it makes no sense for them to be behind the hoop where there's no active play, waiting for a bludger to be whipped at them.
Yeah, it just caused so many.
So we added that rule.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we added in that rule to then have it stop at the keeper's own line, and that was good for a while, except then we ran into cases at Eastern Regionals where the wind was so much that it was Arjun, I remember, stood there and watched and waited as the wind slowly blew the bludger back behind the line, and then pointed it out to me, so then I had to give a card, which is why we are now moving away from that. Or I believe I added an amendment that an act of God could not move the ball past the line.
Which once again,
because Quidditch rules are incredibly dumb and very easy to screw up, especially in somewhere like Canada where the weather sucks all the time.
Which once again, in fair play to Arjun, that's the right call.
Great.
That's brilliant.
Round of applause. Great job. Most of the rules that I fix, I'm very proud of the person who figured it out. I'm very impressed by them figuring it out. And then I hate it, and I hate them for it, and then I change the rule.
But the current iteration, which me and Kyle, I think we talked an hour and a half at least on this one subject the last time we talked rules on a big meeting, was purely of how do you change reasonable beat attempt to allow a beater to still beat without getting trouble for not making a beat.
Yeah, because we had a number of referee sessions last year. I know I ran the ones in the East. I can't speak for the ones in the West because I wasn't there. But most of the topic was, what do I define as a reasonable beat attempt? And we went through kind of what that looks like. And it became such a struggle to say, well, it's about this number of feet, which no one can really conceptualize. And, well, it depends on what the play is going on. Because if there's no reason for them to be beating that person, then it's clearly not reasonable because they shouldn't be beating them. But then that's up to my interpretation of whether or not they should be beating them. If they have the quaffle, but they're a mile away, does it make sense to be beating them? Most cases, no. But if they're about to score on you, then yeah, you go for the Hail Mary pass or beat. So after a lot of struggle on that, I have the benefit in my reffing that my definition of reasonable beat attempt is kind of the definition of reasonable beat attempt. It's very hard for a coach or a captain to argue what is and is not reasonable. They still do. But like a good HR, I never overturn my calls to what a coach says or a captain says. But I have that benefit, but other people don't. And certainly if you're new to the sport, each team has to have an HR face a fine. So you're going to have some HRs that are inexperienced. Maybe they're not beaters. Maybe like us four, they're all quaffle carriers, and they don't know what a reasonable beat attempt is or even what to go on that. It's very hard for them to show up to their first game and have a captain yell at them that, no, he was really trying to beat them when he missed by a mile or they missed by a mile and sent it down the field. So the most recent amendment, which is not in yet because the current amendments are just proposed and will be tested once it is safe to go outside and do testing with other people, is that there's no such thing as a reasonable beat attempt anymore. So it removes ambiguity, so that's great. And instead, the beat attempt needs to be successful, or if you miss the beat attempt, you have to go get that ball.
Or it be under I think the other wording was also, if a player who is being targeted intentionally moves or dodges to avoid the beat attempt. Which it's
if the target was standing still or running in a straight line, if the ball would have hit them without them moving, then it's fine and you can pick up the third bludger.
Yeah.
But if you just straight up miss, like we've seen so many cases of people doing this where they're 2 feet in front of someone and they intentionally miss and whip it, you need to hit that beat now, and then you can, I think Atana called it combo off, in which you beat, pick up another bludger, beat, you can pick up another bludger, beat, you can pick up another bludger, and you can keep going like that. So it's a system that can reward highly skilled play while also not only decentivizing, but disallowing the abuse of the rule. So hopefully bringing down the the top end of the beaters against the low end of beaters, which is really what the problem is, because the newer beaters of the sport have no way to combat this tactic that the higher level beaters have.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well,
Interesting.
Because the main goal of a lot of the changes were to try to bring down the top end and help out the bottom end of players to bring us a bit more close to more even matchups where still the most skillful player is definitely still going to win. There's definitely are still easy ways in the rules that you can show your skill and demonstrate your skill, like by hitting your beat attempts instead of missing them intentionally. But it should hopefully make games a lot closer and make games a lot less dependent on how good your beaters are.
Cool, fair enough. The thing that I really wanted to kind of touch on, Kyle, was the ranking system. So we talked about it in the West episode, and just how I guess it would have been Nationals 2018, I believe.
Probably, yeah.
When it was in Hamilton, where we never got to play the West teams. It was just so how the system kind of works. For example, Queens.
That was in the ranking for that tournament. That was the scheduling for that tournament, and the fact that games were canceled due to weather.
No, well, there's that. There's that.
It was. I think it was a combination of the two. There was part of it was it wasn't solely the ranking system, but also obviously that tournament specifically, the weather was just ridiculous. But just in general, I think there was a lot of people were upset by how the ranking system worked and kind of how I can't remember what year it was we had Calgary was the top because they had only played so many games or something like that. And there's just all these different things going on. So just kind of maybe touch base on kind of what the new ranking system looks like. Some of the things that you and Bryan kind of talked about with how
real quick
to best portray the ranking system.
So real quick, there's actually the current ranking system. Then there was the previous ranking system. Then there was the one before that, which I have no clue how it works. It is mumbo jumbo magic, where I remember looking at the 2015, 2016 rankings, and that's what it was based off. And it was teams had a 2.345, and another team would have a negative 1.2, and I had no clue what that was. The previous system.
Okay, I can't remember that far back was the ELO ranking system.
That was before ELO.
Or if that was just.
That was before ELO.
Well, I don't remember that one.
That was garbage.
I can touch on the ELO.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't remember particularly caring that much about my ranking back when I first started Quidditch. I was just happy to be playing.
I had a
sport from a fantasy novel. But the ELO ranking system was the ranking we had before. And that's commonly used in, or at least what I know it from, is I know chess uses ranking. I know that because, like most people, I watched Queen's Gambit during the pandemic. Have you guys seen that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good show.
Great show. Great show.
Go watch that show. So chess uses it, and a lot of esports, so video game sports, use it. And it's used in those because so many games are played. And it becomes really useful and it's really effective when a lot of games are played. To eventually get you to what your ranking should be and keep you at where your ranking should be so you don't deviate, so you're always matched up against players of similar ranking. The concept does not work at all for Quidditch when we play
10 games.
5 games a semester, 10 games total, where before regionals, the requirement is to play 3 games. So with 3 games in the ELO ranking system, it cannot determine your rank well at all. So what it did was it gives everyone an ELO score. I forget what ELO stands for, but it doesn't matter in this example. But it gives everyone a score of 1,500. And then if you win, your score goes up. If you lose, your score goes down from 1,500. And it goes up proportional to the difference between your score and the person you're playing. So if the top team in the league plays the bottom team bottom team in the league, the bottom team wins. The bottom team gets a huge jump in points. The winning team gets a huge drop in points. If it's more like the middle teams, they have smaller increases and decreases. So it works well in that way. But the problem is that we can only do rankings after every tournament. So at one tournament, the first tournament of the year, everyone has 1,500 as their ranking or as their rating. And then everyone plays each other. So if all the teams were there the ranking would work and it would get a good ranking out of it. Let's say we had a tournament where there was one really good team, one mediocre team, and two very bad teams. The very good team wins all 3 games, no problem. So they have the highest ranking. The mediocre team wins 2 games. So they have the next highest ranking, and then the bottom teams, whatever happens to them. Then we have another tournament that's 4 teams, and we have 4 really, really good teams, like best in the league. So they play, and they all go like 2-2. So now you compare them to that other tournament. Well, the other tournament, the mediocre team won more games. They won 3 games versus only winning 2 games. So they lost 1. So their ranking's higher. So they're rated better because they beat worse teams. So it doesn't actually incentivize you at the beginning of the year to play good teams. What instead you should be doing with that system is to host a tournament where you are by far the best team. Just win your 3 games and then go straight to regionals. Don't play any more games. You have the highest rating with the lowest risk possible by only playing bad teams in one turn. And that's what happened for a number of teams who I think one year we didn't have a requirement for games played. So they came in and they had a rating of 1,500, which is middle of the pack. They ended up being a very not good team, but they were rated middle of the pack, so they ended up being in a high pool and then just got absolutely demolished. So with the rating like that, it just doesn't work. There's no way to compare evenly. The number of games don't help. And you're not incentivized to play good teams, to win against good teams. And it actually doesn't even reward you at all for how good you do against a team or how well you do against a team. It just says, did you win or did you lose? That's all I care about.
Also, to the point of that,
So
another point, real quick, sorry, was at like when you look at that beginning, Elo has a big kind of like jump all at the beginning, and then you kind of settle, and that's how it kind of sets, like Kyle mentioned. You don't have time to settle in Quidditch. We only play a couple games, and you're going all over the place, and then it's like, oh, this is kind of what we ended up with. Cool, I guess, whatever. Also, we also did that, all the rankings, based off a tournament, because you kind of have, I don't know, you can't really time everything perfectly. It's all based off one tournament, and you see the results at the end, and schedules are predetermined, yada, yada, yada. Quidditch, teams get better incrementally through a tournament or through the year. In esports or chess, you kind of have a set level going in. Sure, you'll get a little bit better, but you've already played how many games? Hundreds of games, like thousands of games maybe. So your change in skill is only going to be kind of minor in comparison to what might happen in Quidditch, where you have a 21-person roster. It wasn't effective in any way. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, so it led to bad pools, and the bad pools, when then you add in bad weather ruining those pools, then led to what happened, which was that the way the pools shook out and the way that the ranking shook out and the consolation matches were scheduled for that year, you had a bunch of teams playing each other 4 times, which was an unfortunate combination. So then we came to the next year, and or this past year, rather, and Nationals was a capped Nationals because of the amount of time we had the venue, because of the size of the venue, we can only have so many pitches and we can only have so many teams. So then we need to decide how to bring those teams. So we debated whether or not, well, do you take their standing at regionals? Does that make sense? And it's like, okay, well, what if one team has a really bad matchup at regionals, just gets destroyed, they had just have a bad day, and they were the best team up until that point, and then they lose an unfortunate matchup, and now they can't go to nationals. So that doesn't make much sense. So we need to come up with a rating system that didn't just incentivize you to play bad teams and win, but incentivize you to play anyone and try your hardest because the amount of points you beat them by matters in the system. So we settled on what's called the Massey rating system, and it was used in NCAA football in the States for a long time. And what it does, and I won't go through the math of it, but it basically takes, say I play Bryan, and then Bryan plays Nate, and Nate plays Gabe. It does some complicated math to figure out, well, I beat Bryan by this amount, and Bryan beat Nate by that amount, and Nate beat Gabe by that amount. So based on that, what is their relative rating compared to each other? So even though I've never played Gabe, the system knows, based on how I did against people Gabe played, how I would match against Gabe.
Yeah.
So by doing this, you don't need that many games at all. You just need to play any game against someone who's played a game against someone else, and eventually you play enough games, the system solves. So after one tournament, it won't work because you'll only have your matchup against people at that tournament. But as soon as there's even like one crossover, system solves, and now you know where you are matched up to someone. And then say someone goes on, they had a hot tournament, then they go on to tank the rest of the year. Well, in retrospect, they weren't that good of a team. So now the people they beat are now also a little bit worse. So it also then incentivizes you to keep consistent, to keep going, to keep winning. And it also then allows for rapid changes if you end up beating a high-placed team. Because by being a high-placed team, you're then also beating, and I'm air quoting, the teams that they beat. So by doing this, it allows us to get more consistent rankings. And we looked at the rankings from this past year. And although we don't have stats to really support this, the general consensus was from the people that I showed the rankings to that the rankings were more or less correct. Some arguments can be made for a few switches, up one rank or down one rank. But in general, it was good, except for one exception, which was what happened in the system with forfeits. Because forfeits kind of ruined the system. So for this next iteration, what we're doing next season, we've designed a few safeties that can mitigate how forfeits affect everyone's records and everyone's ratings.
Yeah, I'd also say
about that. So,
go ahead.
Yeah. So if you're like determined who gets to go to nationals, since like West teams don't play East teams throughout the season, how do you rank them like amongst each other and like decide how many of each?
I believe that one we decided on doing it proportionally. Was how we saw on that being the most fair. So taking out considerations of where it is, what province it was in, we just said the most fair way is just to close our eyes and look at math and say, well, the math says there's I forget what it is, but maybe like 2/5 of the teams are in the West, 3/5 are in the East. So 2/5 of the slot to the West, 3/5 to the East, and there you go. But the nice thing about the system, though, is once that nationals happens, as soon as one team from the East plays one team for the West, assuming everything aligns correctly, the system solves itself, and now you have actually good rankings at the end of the year between the West and the East, which is something we could never have with ELO, because ELO doesn't take into account the strength of the team you're playing, it's just whether or not you win or lose. So let's say the team in the East had 10 wins on the season and the team in the West had 10 wins on the season. And then Nationals happens, the West team beats the East. Well, then in the final rankings, it's the Western team's number 1, the Eastern team's number 2, and it doesn't really change the rest of the system at all. But now, if the West were to beat the East, all of a sudden all the Western teams jump up to be higher than the Eastern teams because of the way the system of equations works.
Yeah. Also, real quick, I think Nate, you might have hinted at this. If not, this is another point. Year over year, it's a system of equations, like Kyle mentioned, right? So you have one system for everyone who's played each other. Once you have that one crossover, it gets it's a bigger grid, let's say, bigger matrix. But if you don't have crossover with East versus West, it's 2 separate matrices. Once you have that matchup, you can kind of make it one big thing. The problem will be, how do we compare East in the year versus West in the year? And maybe there's a way to kind of throw in a dummy team where you have basic East team, basic West team from like previous years and kind of average how East teams play versus West teams. It's complicated, but we have to play those games first. There's stuff that has to happen first before we worry about problems like that. So we'll see once.
It also makes no sense to really compare West and East without a purpose, and the purpose is at Nationals.
Yeah.
And we were hoping, with the way that we had it, the relative rating amongst each other should be such that the comparison is good, even though they aren't combined into one equation. But it should be close. It shouldn't be as drastically different as with the ELO system.
Yeah. And
what about like the idea of like a selection committee, like kind of when you kind of talked a little bit like the whole like NCAA thing. Like, you know, I know there's controversy around it, and it's that by no means perfect, but like, ever thought about doing kind of like how the NCAA has like they have a set committee that kind of makes those decisions? Kind of, I don't know.
If there were a bunch of people at Quidditch Canada who were not affiliated with any team, it's possible, but I think with the amount of complaints we would see out of that system, it's not worth it. It's more worth it to just say, here's the math. The math says you beat that person, they beat that person, therefore they're better. Is a much cleaner way to go about it than saying, especially with the comparison between East and West. Because like I know the East teams very well. I played them for years at this point. I know what to look for. West teams, I don't know as well. I haven't played many of them. I'd like to play more of them.
Kyle, have you played against the West team?
It would be very hard. Have I ever played against the West team?
Yeah.
Have I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have? In all your... Oh, wait. When did Queens play against the West team?
What do you mean? We played... Oh, I guess you guys weren't on the team anymore. We played against the Edmonton Oilers.
Oh, yeah.
And then the year... I guess the year before you guys joined, we didn't play against the Calgary Mudbloods, but they were at the national tournament in Kingston. But we didn't play them. Yeah. So I guess I played a Western team once.
I played one twice, but it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I played them. But it would be very hard to get a group together that we could trust, that would be unbiased, and has a working knowledge of how actively good currently every single team in the league is. Because then you need we need one good video from every single game, and then we need that selection committee to watch every single game. And as every QC, I believe every position at QC right now is volunteer based, you would then need someone to volunteer to spend hours and hours watching game footage and then get together to have a debate, which inevitably everyone will dislike their choices of. So good idea in theory, not worth it in practice, and not worth the headache to deal with the fallout from it.
I'm the only crazy person in QC right now to watch hours and hours of film and take stats on it. I don't know if we can actually get someone to take like legitimate points of like, oh, Team A is really good at this, but I think Team B would counter with this. Like, I love it, but God, people would go insane. I think there'd be a group of people.
And I'd like to say Bryan does it of his own choice. I do not force Bryan to look at stats.
Yet.
Bryan sends me spreadsheets. Oh, Kyle, look at the stats I did. Thanks, Bryan. Are we using these for something? No, but they're fun to have.
Future.
That's a lie. We did use some of your stats for how long the games last, how long snitch catches go for, point differential, etc. when justifying our changes for changing the way that the games end.
That's a good point to turn on.
Good segue.
There you go. It's like he's part of the group. Just slightly like a little naturally. I don't know. So on that point, I got a secret DM before this started, and I haven't shared with Gabe or Nate. Oh no, I don't want to lose Kyle. Okay, I'll keep it secret. I'll keep it secret, Kyle. There was a certain thing said about the end game from someone that we are all familiar with, but I will not disclose that at this time. But Kyle, do you want to talk about your end game idea of what the changes is? Because I know it was kind of, I guess, controversial in the CQA.
That's one way to put it. Yeah.
Tell us about it. Tell us.
I wouldn't say controversial. I'd say divisive.
Okay.
But I think first it might be more prudent to talk about some of the problems in Quidditch currently. And maybe that's a good time. Let me ask you guys, what are the problems in gameplay of Quidditch specifically? Let's not talk about Quidditch as a whole, but just the gameplay of Quidditch in Canada. What are your biggest gripes? What do you see as a problem? Keeping in mind that eventually down the line, we're hoping that, one, the pandemic doesn't kill Quidditch, but two, we can turn this into a more spectator sport that is watched and enjoyed by more people.
I would say you can look at like any game with luck versus skill, and I think Quidditch tends a little bit more on the skill side of the spectrum. But I think when it comes to skill, experience trumps natural skill almost all the time, just based off, like, you could be like, oh, I'm good at athletics, but if you don't know where to go, you don't know how to position yourself, you don't know how to use the certain tactics and little things in the game, you're at a complete disadvantage. And I think just pure experience, assuming it's like, oh yeah, I've played like one game a year for the last 5 years, like that's, like, I'm discounting that, but like if you actually played a lot over the years, it really makes a difference compared to someone who's a little bit newer.
Well, yes. More recently, we've definitely seen that teams don't need to practice if they already know what they're doing, and they still get rewarded for that.
Thanks for catching on there, Nate.
Otters, the manatees. I didn't practice last year. I should have worn mine.
Yeah, I was going to mention that experience. Basically, if you have the experience of playing for many years.
But that's a bit more broad than I want, because that's talking about the players. The players, I can't change the players. Looking at the game itself, you get two teams together, they have equal experience, and they play a game. Do you like the way that games went this past season? And if you guys disagree with me on this point, I will ask you to cut this out of the podcast.
No, like I was gonna
get on my page, boys. Cut that bit out.
I thought you guys were gonna go in the direction of like the Pan Ams, that first game where you have the kind of like literally the very first play of the game, you have two teams running at each other, and the guy was like knocked unconscious. That's where I thought you guys were going.
You can go for that.
That is definitely like for me like. Like there is no sport where you have two teams running full speed head on towards each other.
Football.
Like it's
football.
Like, I guess football,
but even they've been trying to change it. In the XFL, they changed the kickoff rule, which I was waiting to watch, and then the XFL was promptly canceled, and I didn't get to see how the rules played out. Which was weirdly the only reason I was interested in the XFL was just rule changes. Cool, I'll watch that. But yeah, starting the game is definitely a cause of concern, but other things. Work with me here, boys.
I'll point out real quick with the football point. There's also a thing called a safe catch. You can literally be like, yeah, I'm just going to take the ball here, and you don't get clobbered. Yeah. That's a crazy idea, but apparently they adopted that. I know this will sound divisive to Kyle. I love what MLQ did with the point cap. I think there are flaws with it, but I think that's a step in a good direction compared to the old system. I think the old system would just snitch cap.
What is it about a point cap?
Pardon?
That you like?
Well, the fact that
what is it about a point cap that you like?
It's tending toward an end point. Like there's kind of a known point where you're gonna end the game, and it's not just gonna keep going and going and going. Like
it makes scoring during snitch on pitch meaningful instead of like committing all your time to trying to catch a snitch with your beaters instead of focusing on the quaffle game as well.
Yeah. Everyone's still relevant at that point. Like, you can win the game by catching a snitch. You can catch a game by just throwing a lot of quaffles in. Both things work, and there's actual, like, everyone still serves a purpose on the pitch, and yeah, it can end the game and not be a complete just joke where it goes on for 35 minutes where it's, or it can go to like hour or minute 40 or something, and it's still going, and the game is already decided without being decided yet.
Yeah.
Kyle, did I kind of get to where you're going?
Let me just cut, you can cut most of that out if it doesn't play well, and cut out me saying this. What I'll just start from. So my biggest problems with Quidditch is currently and the way it's played in Canada, or let me first talk about point cap, because people bring up the point cap. People love the point cap in concept. So I also like the point cap in concept. I do not like the point cap for us in Canada. And the reason is that I had Bryan, my stats guy, go and tell me what the point differential is between two teams on average in Canada when snitch enters pitch. So that would be how you would base the score cap. I also asked Bryan, how fast are people scoring in Canada before the snitch is on pitch and after? And then based on that, we did a number of calculations to figure out when a team, based on the average, which is maybe not the most fair, but it's the only way we could have with just raw stats, how long does it take to hit the point cap? Bryan, do you remember the stats?
It was not long. Oh, sorry. Oh, to get the point cap. Sorry.
You hit the point cap. So let's say the point cap's 60. I can tell you because I looked up the stats again before this podcast.
Yeah.
The average point differential in Canada last year before snitches on pitch. And after snitches on pitch, most teams who are winning win even more, right? Because we'll touch on why that is. But before snitches on pitch, average difference is 90 points.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you set a score cap on that. Say the score cap, I think MLQ is what, 60?
Yes, 60. It used to be 70. They moved it down to 60. It's about the same thing.
So we put a score cap of 60 points on top of that. So the losing team now has to make up 150 points to win the game before the other team scores 60.
Yep.
We did the math, and people were scoring every minute and a half after the snitches on pitch.
Yeah, it's called
Minute and 20. We'll call it minute and a half for some easy math.
Yeah.
So at a minute and a half per goal, 15 goals to win. $22 minutes to catch up. It's a 42-minute game. Or sorry, 40-minute game even. Nice math.
Yeah.
So that's a 40-minute game for the losing team to catch up just by scoring quaffle points on average. Okay? If they were to catch the snitch, that's another calculation because that would knock off whatever amount of points it was at that point in the game based on the MLQ rules. I don't remember. But it knocks off some amount of time. But it's a ludicrous amount of time that's not possible. And we know in Canada that teams who are losing more often than not elect to do cold catches. They elect to just end the game there and move on. And they do that when they're currently down 90 points. If I tell them they have to score 150 points, how fast are they catching that snitch to end the game? Instantly. The game's over as soon as the snitch comes on pitch because that's now the score count. Right? And it's impossible. Bryan, are you checking me on stats?
No, a little bit. So I pulled up I did extra stats that like Kyle mentioned that I just shoved in Kyle's face and was like, look what I did. I'm special. I'm great. And they were just kind of something I did on my own volition. But I looked at the last 4 or 5 years of major tournaments, and it was how many of these games weren't even close. Final score was a blowout, which I think I qualified at 90 points just so I was okay, it's just less than 100. Maybe someone comes back. The total games, and here the weird thing was there was I think over the years it just got less and less and less. The amount of games that weren't blowouts, so they were actually within 90 points, which didn't mean they were 10 or 20. They could be on 60 or 70. The amount of games that weren't blowouts was 63%. There was 40% of games immediately not even close. If you took another slice of that and went to 60 points, which is still pretty darn far. I think that was there was one game last year that was a comeback from 60 points, if that.
And how many games were played last year?
A lot. It's 100.
So one game out of a lot of games was a comeback victory.
140 something. Yeah.
So anyway, back to my math. Yeah. So then if the winning team were to make those 60 points, if they don't catch the snitch, it takes 8 minutes. So 26-minute game, not too bad, getting on the verge of long. If they do catch the snitch, obviously it's faster than that. But the point cap does not solve an issue in any way. Because what's the issue that point cap is trying to solve?
It tries to make the game finish earlier, I guess.
Right. Finish earlier and more exciting. And what it would actually do based on the current stats in Canada. And let's say with all our new changes that come in, scoring goes way up. I'm back on board to talk point cap. Current stats that I have to go on for making rules, point cap would make games long. It would make them one-sided, and we would just have more and more cold catches like we already do.
Yeah.
So I also want to talk about cold catches because I understand them. And I understand the logic behind them. They make complete sense in a tournament format where you're playing more games after. You just end the game, you move on. points barely matter. Wins and losses matter more for your ranking in a tournament. So just end the game and move on. But when it gets to the point that 28% of the games last year ended in a cold catch, something is fundamentally wrong with the ending of the sport if 28% of the time teams don't want to play the sport anymore. If they don't see victory as a possibility, if they don't see trying to come back as an option, if they just say, that's it, we're done, let's move on. And I totally understand it. I totally get it. But from the point of view of someone who's trying to make the sport more watchable, we had the experience at Uxbridge last year, which was a great experience. You know, lots of kids and their families there dressed up, Harry Potter robes, the whole shebang. Great time. And one of the games, I forget who was playing, it doesn't matter. But the game ended in a cold catch. But so one team caught the snitch and the crowd goes wild, right? Because they caught the snitch. And then I believe it was Christos that had to go up to the crowd, because then the crowd kind of got confused because the team that caught the snitch wasn't the one celebrating, it was the other team that was celebrating. So then Christos goes up to the crowd of people and says, hey, everyone, just like to explain to you what happened. That team doesn't want to play anymore. So they caught the snitch just to end the game and move on. But that team actually won. Yeah. And I'm not the biggest sports guy, but I'm a pretty big sports guy. I watch a lot of sports. It's the most disappointing and frustrating end to a game or a sport that I have seen. And there's got to be a better way that incentivizes teams to keep trying. That, sure, there's still going to be the blowouts where you're down by 150 come 20 minutes. Sure, I understand that's likely and statistically unwinnable. But if you're in that 90 range, I want to help you make it so that it's close, so that you can come back. Dangle a little bit of a carrot on an end of a stick saying, hey, if you play for a little bit more, one, you're going to get a little bit more practice. That's going to be great for you in the long run. Two, maybe you win. Or three, maybe you don't win, but it's a closer game, and that's better off for you with our ranking system that we've introduced and that we talked about, where the ranking is based on how well you do in a game. So cold catching might not be beneficial to doing that, because maybe you catch more quaffle points. But then some people would argue, well, cold catching gets you 30 points, so that's more than we would have scored. So what do we do for those people? And I also know that some teams, if they can't win a game, at least, I've heard this from teams, at least they can get excitement from catching the snitch. And that's something they can celebrate. They beat the other team to the snitch, caught it, and they're good. So we're trying to come up with a system that accomplishes all those goals, keeps in all the stuff we like, which is that, you know, sometimes the snitch does end the game. And it's a really hype moment. One team seeker dives in, they catch it, they break a tie and they win, or they come from 20 points behind and win. And it's great. But that was not happening nearly as much as we want it to happen. And also, what I want to talk about the ending of Quidditch is, in most sports, there's something you can do to make coming back easier. In football, that would be the onside kick. On basketball, you foul the other team a bunch of times to force them to the free throw line. You hope they miss, and then you get the ball and you try to score. That one upsets me for other reasons, just as a spectator, but that exists. Hockey, you pull the goalie. You now have a 6-on-5 with whatever minutes left you choose. It's easier to score. There's some comeback mechanics. How do you come back in Quidditch? You're down points. You have to score more than the other team. You have to prevent them from scoring. And you have to prevent them from ending the game. How do you do all three at the same time to come back?
Especially if you're already losing by a fair bit.
Yeah. How do you do that? You don't. That's the answer. The Hail Mary is, well, you let their beaters be distracted by the snitch, but they won't be, because if you're not committing to the snitch, their beaters have no reason to be there. If they're up by 90, they're not committing beaters to the snitch. They're committing beaters to prevent you from scoring. So actually, the team that's winning has the absolute advantage, because they can prevent you from catching the snitch, prevent you from scoring. Well, they prevent you from catching the snitch, because if you catch the snitch, they win. They prevent you from scoring, and if they catch the snitch, they win. So what do? You do nothing and you lose the game. And you get into the mindset that you are going to lose the game, because statistically, for sure you are. It's so hard to come back. So we want to come up with a system that can beat all those things, incentivize a little bit, but still make it so that the team that is winning has the advantage because they are winning. So we talked for a long time, and we iterated on this idea of dividing the game up into periods and having a final period where the snitch comes on pitch. And a lot of iteration on how the game ended. Eventually, we finalized on the idea of snitch period is 5 minutes. Snitch period is 5 minutes. If after those 5 minutes the snitch has been caught, the game ends, which is really, really nice. I'll talk about why it's really nice in a sec. And if the snitch hasn't been caught, then the snitch ends the game from that point forward. So it combines a number of things. So it combines that after 5 minutes, we still get the nice snitch catch ends the game, which people like. And usually if it goes that long, it's probably because there's two teams really going at it and they're tied. So the snitch catch should end the game and be this hype moment at the end of the game. But it also brings in the excitement of overtime to every time in Quidditch, which is a slogan I've been using since I came up with the idea. Because I'll ask you guys, and this might be biased for most people in this room, what was the most exciting game of Quidditch you watched last season?
Do you mean like last season, as in like the first semester of fall 2019?
Before COVID?
Yes, that is in fact what I mean by last season. Okay. Yeah,
Pre-COVID?
Last fall semester. What do you think the most exciting game was and why?
I would argue the finals was good, but not it. I would argue the bronze game
but the finals was good because it was very close and the snitch catch won the game.
Yeah. The bronze was good. All like being a part of it was good. It wasn't the most amazing game, so I'm not gonna say that.
But it was a fun game.
It was a good game.
The other team was down 40 points, and then we caught the snitch. So it was close.
It was close.
It was exciting.
I think this is the answer, and I'll give Gabe and Nate. You guys want to guess beforehand? You guys got it? Because I think I know the answer.
I have a game, but it's from like the previous season. It was like the indoor tournament at Guelph. I know one game there.
I mean, that's not quite what I'm talking about, Nate. But you.
Okay.
Yes, it was Miguel Queens was the correct answer.
Overtime, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was exciting because it was overtime. Two teams were tied. Snitch is on the pitch. Snitch is super important. There's a countdown to when the game ends. And I think it got down to the countdown, too, before the snitch was caught.
Yeah.
That was the most exciting Quidditch I had seen in a while. And it left such a profound... My heart was racing, and it left such a profound impact in my mind that I looked at it and said, that is the excitement you should feel more times in Quidditch. Yeah. Though I do kind of hate how overtime works. But that's beside the point. Or actually, I hate how double overtime works. That one sucks.
Slow changes.
Anyway, so that is a long preamble to say, so what we did was make it so that there's a 5-minute cap. So if in that 5 minutes the snitch gets caught, great, add 35 points to the person who caught it, the team who caught it. They get 35 points, and now game ends in 5 minutes. So this does a number of things. And I'll go through them in kind of order. So Bryan did some stats from last year. The average snitch catch time was 4 minutes. However, it was 4 minutes because most of the games were either 1 minute snitch catches or a billion-minute snitch catches, and there was not a whole lot in between.
Yeah.
So it was on average 4, but it really wasn't. So most snitches were either getting caught instantly or going the distance. And that is not good for anyone because a snitch catch too fast, there's no chance for you to come back. The snitch might not be the most skilled because we require snitches. Games end too quickly. Even the finals of Eastern Regionals ended with like a 7-second snitch catch or something like that. I know I've done some 7-second snitch catches, which are kind of heartbreaker snitch catches, and they don't feel good for anyone. Like, even as the person catching a snitch in 7 seconds, like, okay, yeah, I did it. I don't feel like I earned this. I won the game, great, but like this feels shady. And I think one of them I even won in 7 seconds. I apologized to the other team, which is probably like the most Canadian thing I've done in a sport, which is say, hey, sorry, I won. Here you go. But it feels bad. It left a bad taste in my mouth. But so it prevents mediocre snitches from blowing games in people's minds for people by getting caught instantly, and it also brings down the chances that someone goes the distance. And that's because in that 5 minutes, if one team is ahead by a lot, and it gives the losing team a choice on whether or not to catch or defend. If they choose to defend, it can help a weaker snitch last longer because now they have someone defending them. And I mean, the opposite is true. If both of them are going for it, they're going to last 2 seconds. But that's kind of what happens. That's why people are caught in 7 seconds. Usually it's 2 snitches are going, or 2 seekers are going for them. But if it's a really good snitch, team might choose to go for the catch, in which case both teams are going for the catch. Brings down the snitch catch time overall, and brings it down to 25 minutes, which is just a bit higher than the average we calculate.
Yeah.
But so the whole idea of it was to give the losing team a choice and an option. And the comeback mechanic that I came up with and that I envisioned could happen depending on the score. I know there was some argument on the Quidditch Canada Facebook page about whether or not people would use this mechanic. And I'm not going to be too upset if people don't use it. But people can use it. And that's the point. You have the option, which is the Hail Mary play. You're down 90 points. Go catch that snitch. Okay, now you're down 55 points. Is that in the doable range? Well, at 1:20 per goal, you have 5 minutes to do it. It's just outside the realm of possibility.
But maybe that motivation of catching the snitch and shifting momentum is there.
Yeah. Maybe you say, okay, we're down 90. I'll stall for this 5 minutes, or stall for 3 minutes. Because even if they catch it, you don't have to dedicate your beers to prevent the game from ending. Because even if they catch it, oh, well, they're now up 35 points more, a little bit harder, but the game's not done. You can keep going. So maybe you say, okay, forget about the snitch, focus all my beaters on scoring. We're just going to score, bring the score closer. Maybe around the 3-minute mark, you start looking at that snitch thinking, hey, maybe a quick little 35 points might be good to help us come back even more. Quick 35 catch. Now we're down 20 points and there's 1.5 minutes left in the game. And everyone, including the crowd, is the most excited they've ever been for a game.
Love it.
I know there was a lot of rambling in there and a lot of justifications and, oh, that justification reminds me of this justification. But just goes to say, I've thought a lot about this and all the benefits it has. And I feel that the benefits outweigh the cons. And I'm interested to hear your feedback. Go ahead, boys.
So how many periods are there, you said?
Two.
There are 2 periods, but if the second period doesn't end at 5 minutes. So if the snitch is not caught in the 5 minutes, the snitch period comes to a close and we go to extra time, taking the phrase from football, but not American football.
Soccer.
Actual football.
Footy.
Yeah. Goes to extra time where the snitch catch ends the game.
I like it. I do like it. I was going to say one point I wanted to say back about, and I mentioned the point cap. The one difference why I like the point cap, except it works in MLQ, because it's almost like a whole bunch of all-star teams playing against each other. You have top-tier talent all the time who can go and score all the time. If you have some lower-ranked teams, it doesn't work necessarily. You have a lot
of faster pace too, right? Like,
yes.
If you look at like the level, like the speed, I'd be interested to see like the stats for that, like the average time per goal, like in both periods, because much just faster. Playing in MLQ, it's so much faster, and it's like polar opposite from QC.
So that I don't think would work with QC, but
with a point cap, saying catch up 150 is a lot harder of a sell to get people to stick in the game than catch up 90 and you can automatically get a 35 point bump. I know with the point cap you can't absolutely catch the snitch, but a 40-point jump in a 150-point game is a lot.
Yeah.
Like they're similar, they're about 33%, but it still feels a lot less insurmountable trying to strive for 90 points. And also because then once you catch up, you're not then trying to keep beating them and get to a point cap. You just need to get one goal above them and hold.
Yeah. I remember in, I think my second or third year of Quidditch, I played against UDEM when they were still UDEM, before they were the Flamingos. And pre-snitch on Guelph, we were winning I think the score was 110-20. We had the game. Snitch came on, and our beaters went over to try helping the Seeker catch the Snitch. Snitch was really good. UDEM ran over us, and they caught up almost instantly. And it was like, okay, it's possible. If you have the right system, this is possible to catch up. And what this system is encouraging you to be like, hey, like, you can catch a Snitch, change momentum, score some goals, and you can win this game. No matter how much you've seen out of it, it's possible. And I think that's every time is overtime system, which I do like. I hadn't heard that before, but I like it.
T-shirt.
Second T-shirt every time.
The thing it also does is it makes the qualifier period now 20 minutes, which is nice because I was also hearing a lot of complaints from people that they felt like they weren't getting enough shifts in, and maybe that's just everyone taking too long shifts, which I know is a problem. But if I can help out in some way by saying, okay, now you have 2 extra minutes, you can get some extra reps in before the Snitch is on pitch, and then you take a break. And during that break, we now experienced teams are very good at they can take a timeout, they can strategize, they can cool down, and they know what's going to happen in Snitch period. They can look at the score and go, okay, it's 60 points. We have a plan in place. We're going to do X, Y, Z, and this is how we're going to win this game. But for a weaker team, if they're going into the Snitch on pitch, they don't have a timeout. The Snitch just comes on. They have to talk to the team like, okay, so we're 70 points down. What do we do? What's the protocol? There's no planning phase, right? So by giving it this halftime, though the halves are different, so it's an intermission. By giving this intermission, teams have this time to strategize, to think about it, to try to think more critically, and try to have it so that teams that are less experienced in the strategy of it have a moment to strategy and think, because for experienced players, which we talked about a while ago at this point, experienced players just know, but the inexperienced players need some time to think, and we're trying to give them that time. And also, I want people to switch sides because I'm frankly tired of not switching sides.
Yeah, we can go into that story with the wind and stuff another time. That's nuts. But me and Kyle very much know there's a very legitimate reason why we should be switching sides. It can be very much abused, and I think the change to do it is important. Just on a reference note, we're starting to run out of time because I know there's some other commitments that need to be reached. But I just want to do a quick round of questions off to Kyle. Okay. All I want to hear is like maybe 10 seconds of like, yeah, this is good. Why is it good? That's it. Okay. Timeouts.
10 seconds.
Yep. Timeouts.
Why are they good?
Yeah.
For the exact reason I just talked about, the intermission is going to be good.
Awesome. 2-arm tackling.
Safer. Makes Quaffle players effective on defense. Makes it less dependent on beaters being your sole form of defense, and makes it less...
10 seconds. 10 seconds. That's it. That's all you got. Sorry. Charging. How do you feel about charging?
Unsafe. Wild that it was in the game. Bizarre that it's there. Shouldn't be there. Not going to be there. When there's a safer option, I understand why it was necessary before, but there's a safer option now. We're doing that.
Absolutely. This one I'll give you a little bit more time. You can go 20 seconds. Field of play when it changed from the pill shape to the box. How do you feel about that?
Pill shape?
Yeah.
Pill shape was easily abusable based on the rules as written, as evidenced by national championship 2 years ago.
Was it?
Weird to draw, hard to draw, bad to do on a field, 2 separate lines, which is the pill shape, and then a square around the pill shape. A lot of cones, a lot of lines, a lot of stuff going on. Doesn't fit well on a pitch. Easily abusable with the rules that the person who pushes you out of bounds gets a yellow.
Yep.
Painting lines.
Defense, painting lines. Painting lines in a square, easier than in an oval. 1. Pushing someone out is an effective way to boost defense in a league where defense, quaffle-wise, is bad. Or not bad, but worse than the bludger defense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Done in every other sport with lines.
Yeah.
The end.
Hockey's the one exception, and even that it's because you have contained boards.
Get boards that keep the
That's yeah.
play.
Yeah, but if we had boards in Quidditch, it would be yellow card to push someone into a board, and then it's easily abusable because you just hug the board and wait for someone to run at you, and then you throw yourself at the board and say, "Hey, they pushed me in the board. That's a yellow."
Exactly. Inbounding. How do you feel about inbounding? We kind of changed.
Everyone needs to read the rules. That's my feedback on that.
That's fair.
It was many tournaments too late before people started figuring out how inbounding worked. The first term I went to that year, I seemed to be the only one to understand what was supposed to happen.
I know
that no one read the rules and everyone just said, well, it's like soccer, right? Kinda. No, it's more like basketball, but people aren't as familiar with that because maybe they didn't grow up playing Tidbits basketball, which I don't think is a thing.
Yeah. I would say also there was one good change from like the previous inbounding to this year inbounding with whoever's holding the ball and like if it goes down, like there's little changes that we picked up over the years with that. So yeah,
it's a change. It's changed this year on what happens if two people are holding a quaffle. Who does the ball go to? And we changed in this most recent proposed amendment to it goes to the person who didn't have sole possession of it last.
Yeah.
So it's assuming that someone is dragging someone out of bounds to get the ball.
Yeah.
I believe the IQA is doing a rule where it's whoever goes out of bounds first. But in a world where cones are squiggly lines and lines aren't painted, how do you decide who steps on the line first? It's impossible, so we're not doing it. When we had painted lines, yeah, it's possible, but it's still hard. You need the HR to be on the line watching, which isn't going to happen.
And I'll say one last one before I give Gabe or Nate a chance. Reset line.
Bryan, stop doing what you're doing with the reset line. I made rules to stop you from doing what you're doing. So for the audience, what Bryan likes to do, which if I was reffing Bryan this year, I would have given you a warning that card for it, was the rules say that you can run back across one or more reset lines or restrictor lines. So that's what Bryan chooses to do whenever he does a reset, is he will sprint back across both to stall the game.
As long as you are continuing one continuous motion in one direction in a straight line.
No, because the rule that says that you must move with the intent to score at all times supersedes your point, so I would give you a card.
Damn it.
But no one knows the rules well enough to do that, so no one gave you a card. So it ended up with stalls happening for, I think the longest that I clocked in my watching was 35 seconds. I saw a lot of 25 seconds, which is why we added a play clock, which maybe if I'm back for another episode, we can go into some more changes, because there were a lot of changes to unpack, and there was a lot of reason, a lot of thinking gone into all the changes.
Yeah. When they say you can go back up to the previous restrictor line or whatever line, I'm going to use every single foot, inch, centimeter, millimeter that I can get my foot on before I have to head in the opposite direction. So,
and now you can't. I changed it. You can't do it.
Hey, I was there. I approved it. I was fine. I just like bending rules once in a while. There's a famous hockey coach. I'll give a quick anecdote. There's a famous hockey coach out there. I don't remember his name, but he was famous for bending rules. He had stuff like he'd have the goalie leave the stick down in front of the net. He'd have the goalie like scrape a pile of snow in front of his net to stop pucks. He is a revolutionary. I don't remember his name. Look him up.
I see you watch the obscure rules videos on YouTube.
Yes, I do. Phenomenal coach. There's literally this guy came up was the reason why a bunch of rules were created. And if you can be the reason why rules created, that's great. But we need to fix that rule. So yeah. Gabe, Nate, any final ones for Kyle for his opinion?
You're not even gonna hit me with advantage?
Sure, advantage.
Advantage is another podcast.
Another podcast.
Yeah, I think
I bring it up because that's something else that I kind of created and was kind of divisive, and a lot of people have come around on and have sent me messages to say, okay, I understand it now. It makes a lot of sense. But that's something that takes a bit of time for me to explain the reason behind and to explain how it works. As still, most people don't understand how it works. But that's a topic for another podcast.
Is that like advantage? You mean advantage like as in like what you would see in like football or soccer, like that kind of advantage? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that continues until
like the advantage in Quidditch, the advantage rule that's been in place for 2 years since you played, Gabe.
Yeah.
You played it.
Like I said, I'm bringing the average Joe's.
Have you ever been reset back to your half or your keeper zone line during a game?
I should have known.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. All right, we'll wrap it up here. I think we'll probably do a part 2. I think just because there's so many other things we could talk about, but just for the sake of time, we wrap it up. We'll quickly plug our socials. So Nate has our Instagram. It's CQQC_podcast. Go follow us there. Stay up to date with some of our content we're doing here on YouTube. And we'll likely be back for part 2 with Kyle, Professor Ross. So thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
If I could plug not my social, but my Quidditch email, I have requested that teams give me feedback on the proposed rules. And as of recording this podcast, I've received 0 feedback, which means everyone loves it, right? And I can just keep on going what I'm doing. But I know that's probably not the case. So if you email me at kyle.ross@quidditchcanada.com, let me check to make sure that's my email. Hold on.
I will put it in the description below.
Yeah.
I will flash it across the screen right now.
Yes, that's right.
Right now.
That's right. No, edit that out. It was what I said. Shoot me an email about your feedback, and I will look at it because we are actively looking to implement changes so that hopefully, maybe, please, we can test it this summer, COVID providing.
All right. Yeah. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back with part 2 in the next one. Yeah.
See ya.